She thought they were just women until one unexpectedly shouted, "Your legacy will burn today." Sarah stood at the back of the town hall, gripping the worn edges of her purse, her heart racing. The room buzzed with tension as voices rose and fell like the tide, winding through positions and counter-arguments. Today's meeting felt like a storm brewing, and Sarah felt herself drawn into the center of it without having any say. Amidst the crowd, she stared at the faces of the townsfolk she had grown up with. Each one seemed to forget about her burdens as an artist and a single mother. They swarmed around plans for an art center, fully overlooking the community garden her grandmother had tended with utmost love. The walls felt like they were closing in as an elderly artist, revered in the community, leaned forward, her voice sharp like glass. "Your legacy will burn today." The words cut through the chatter, silencing the roar of opinions. It thrummed in Sarah's chest, setting her nerves alight. A few heads nodded, but to Sarah, it was a clarion call, a challenge, not just for her, but for her children, her future. Was her grandmother's toil to be dismissed in the rush for something new? A flicker of fear ignited. If they tore down that garden, every memory of her grandmother would feel like it had vanished into thin air. Sarah's mind raced with self-doubt. Should she speak up? She wanted to challenge them, raise her voice, but could she risk being labeled an outcast in her own town? The weight of her grandmother's death lingered heavily on her heart. Had she really known her as well as she thought? Would she unknowingly watch another piece of her legacy fade away amid choices made by others? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Sarah felt torn between her desires and her responsibilities. What if her fight to save the garden painted her as a lone wolf? Her kids, Ella and Jake, looked to her with hopeful eyes, their innocence a weight upon her shoulders. The chaotic chatter resumed, a chorus of approval for visions that sidelined the gifts of those who cared for the land. They didn't see the history she was fighting for, the laughter shared amongst friends under the shade of the tall sunflowers, or the way it had been a refuge in her childhood. A fiery anger brewed within her, battling against her weighing uncertainty. It became harder to ignore the betrayal of a close friend who was quick to support the art center. The fear of rejection, of standing alone to uphold her legacy, felt monumental. What if she ignited conflict instead of harmony? As the fragile threads of her hope intertwined with despair, she thought of her grandmother, of the vibrant murals she had painted in the neighborhood, all detached from Sarah's own aspirations until now. Could she truly rally against this tide and honor the heart of her family? As chance rose for change, she felt everything crashing down. Her dreams, her identity, all rustling quietly like leaves ready to scatter in the wind. What if the threads connecting her past and future were already on fire, just waiting for the right spark? Sarah's finger hovered perilously close to the brink. The sirens of her emotional turmoil sung louder, drowning herself in uncertainty as the elderly woman's words replayed in her mind. Would her legacy burn today? As she succumbed to the churning doubt, the very question echoed. What would the ashes of her grandmother's love leave behind? The air felt thick with anticipation as Sarah stood, engulfed in the weight of countless thoughts. She could almost feel her grandmother's presence beside her, urging her to speak, to assert her identity against the tide of indifference. As her heart raced, it was coupled with an unexpected spark of determination. Sarah could sense that this was not only a battle for the garden, it was a pivotal moment to redefine herself. What if she could weave the threads of her past into a vibrant tapestry, one that represented her desires and values? She was more than just a daughter of the woman who had tended that garden. She was an artist with her own vision, capable of shaping her future. Taking a deep breath, Sarah pushed through the fear gripping her throat. "Excuse me!" Her voice broke through the crowd, shaky but resolute. The murmurs quieted, and heads turned towards her, some with curiosity, others with skepticism. "This garden is not just a piece of land," she continued, finding solace in her grandmother's memory. "It's a legacy, a part of my family's history, and it represents a history we all share. The words unraveled like the threads of a well-worn fabric, drawing back the silenced voices of her community. A sudden rush of vulnerability washed over her, but she pressed on. My grandmother nurtured this garden with her heart, her sweat. It's a sanctuary for the bees, a place for children to play, and a reminder that we thrive on the love and dedication of those who came before us. Her voice gained strength, bolstered by the memories flooding her mind. There was youthful laughter, colorful blooms, and quiet moments of reflection spent beneath the tree. Her childhood flashed before her. In those snippets, she found a deeper understanding of her grandmother's spirit, not just as a tender custodian of earth, but as a fearless dreamer who infused her passions into every petal and leaf. A few discontented murmurs surfaced, but Sarah pressed through the rising tide of discomfort, bolstered by newfound resolve. We can build, we can create, but we must do it without burying the past. This garden can coexist with new dreams. Let's transform it into a space where art and nature inspire one another rather than tearing them apart. With those words, the tide shifted, but not into a current of unanimous agreement. Debate still rippled through the attendees. Some looked at her with sensing eyes, unsure how to balance their own nostalgia against the allure of progress. But Sarah had ignited something within herself, a flickering flame of tenacity that refused to be extinguished. In the back of her mind echoed the ringing questions. How had she found this voice now? Where had this newfound strength been hiding while she kept herself bound by the chains of her doubts? A figure emerged from the crowd, her friend Maria, whose endorsement for the art center had hurt the most. "Sarah, I never knew how much this meant to you," she said cautiously, measuring her words. "You could help us find a compromise." Maria's admission momentarily dented Sarah's anger, morphing it into a wave of hope. Perhaps she could engage in a conversation that fostered unity without the threat of conflict. But the question still loomed large in Sarah's heart. Could she really navigate this tumultuous space, balancing the legacies of the past and the dreams of the future? As the discussion swirled around her, a challenge ignited. She had faced her fears and pressed into the daylight. Yet within her, a deeper reflection sparked. A question that begged to be answered. What lengths would she go to protect her legacy? And how far would she push to honor not only her grandmother's name, but her own evolving identity? With each flicker of uncertainty, Sarah knew the real test was only beginning, and she would soon discover just how much she was willing to risk for the garden, and for herself. The air felt electric, charged with raw emotion as Sarah stood at the center of the gathering, caught in a whirlwind of anticipation and anxiety. People were still whispering amongst themselves, debating her words. Had she really managed to plant a seed of doubt regarding their plans? As she clutched her notes, she could feel her grandmother's guiding spirit enveloping her, an invisible hand pushing her toward fortitude and clarity amidst the chaos. Maria had moved closer, her expression a mixture of sympathy and determination. "Sarah, you're making them think, but we need to get specific about what we want to keep. They want to know it's not just nostalgia." Her eyes were earnest, a quiet challenge wrapped in concern. Sarah nodded, but felt the tightness in her chest again. Her grandmother had spent decades caring for this garden in ways both tangible and emotional. Now the narrative around it shifted, and she feared there might not be room for both memory and progress. She opened her mouth, but the words tangled in her throat. What if she could propose a clear plan? A vision that merged her artistic aspirations with the essence of the garden? A spark flared in her mind, igniting the flame of possibility. What if we incorporate art installations that celebrate its history? Murals that depict stories from my grandmother's time? Interactive sculptures made from the materials right here? It wouldn't erase the garden. It would enhance it. The murmurs quieted, replaced by puzzled expressions. There was an unease in the air still, but curiosity glimmered as well. This was not just about resistance, it was about creating balance. Maria nodded slowly, her expression shifting from uncertainty to intrigue. "That's an interesting angle, but are you prepared for what it'll take? Gathering artists, funding, all of that could be an uphill battle." For the first time, Sarah felt the weight of the challenge settle comfortably on her shoulders. "I'm ready," she asserted, a chill of realization coursing through her. "I've been waiting too long to speak up. If I start feeling scared, I'll remember why this mattered to me in the first place." The discussions continued, and Sarah repositioned herself, her thoughts racing ahead. What was the next step? Who could she involve in this project? Could she tap into her own artistic networks? Ideas began toning and molding in her mind like clay, and with each passing moment, the fear that once paralyzed her loosened its grip. Yet, despite her newfound resolve, the specter of resistance lingered just beyond her reach. Old narratives would not just fade beneath fresh paint and creativity. She had to confront the conflict head-on. A man in the crowd, weary from years of fighting for change, stepped forward. "You talk about murals and art, but does that honor the past or just mask it? Will your transformations really preserve what we've built here?" His voice was laced with skepticism, and it struck Sarah like a challenge. She took a deep breath, grounding herself before facing this confrontation. "This isn't about masking. This is about placing the history in a new light, threading my grandmother's legacy with an evolving vision. It doesn't have to be one or the other." Some in the crowd exchanged glances, while others remained steadfast in their doubt. This was a turning point. She realized she could not merely assert her thoughts. She had to prove they carried weight. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting shadows that enveloped the gathering, Sarah understood the alchemy of her challenge. She had to meld the echoes of the past with the flames of innovation. Yet what if she were met with outright hostility? Would she have the courage to stand her ground not just for the garden, but for herself as an artist and an individual? With each gaze directed at her, anticipation coiled tighter, a challenge poised at her feet. The warmth from her grandmother's memory ignited courage within her, but the external and internal confrontations were only just beginning. How far could she push? What would she risk? "I won't back down," Sarah declared, her voice rising above the tremors of uncertainty. The eyes of her community held questions of loyalty, identity, and future. The stakes had never felt higher as Sarah braced herself for the truth that would soon unveil. The hour was late, and deeper revelations loomed like shadows cast by the dimming light. Would the flicker of doubt ignite into flames of confrontation? The crowd shifted uneasily, the collective weight of skepticism bearing down like a storm cloud ready to erupt. Sarah's declaration hung in the air, potent and fragile. She could feel her heart pounding, out of sync with the discontented murmurs that rose around her. How had she turned from the hopeful artist into a defiant figure staring down the shadows of her community's fears? Eyes turned toward the man who had posed the challenge, his brow furrowed as if he were wrestling with the implications of her words. Sarah sensed the pulse of uncertainty, her own emotions mirroring those of the people gathered before her. Frustration twisted inside her. She had longed for this moment, yet the tension felt more like a barrier than the bridge she wanted to build. "What gives you the right to dictate how we remember this space?" An older woman shouted from the back, her voice sharp. "You're just a kid with a dream, and dreams don't preserve history." The accusation hit Sarah like a slap, igniting a wave of defensiveness. Her dream had been brushed aside so many times, buried beneath expectations. But this time, she felt a flicker of indignation rise within her. She took a breath, deep and measured, letting the emotion rise and settle within her. "This isn't about erasing our history," she found her voice firmer. "It's about building on it, expanding it to include our present and our future. Isn't that what we owe the generations that will come after us?" The silence that followed was thick. She could almost feel the gears turning within the minds before her. Their expressions softened, but doubt still lingered. In that pivotal moment, she realized how critical it was for her not only to speak, but to listen. What did they truly fear? She stepped slightly forward, seeking connection in the sea of faces. "I want to honor what was here. My grandmother tended this garden as much with her heart as with her hands. That legacy deserves to flourish in ways we might not even yet envision." Her vulnerability dripped into the silence, and she sensed the structure of opposition beginning to shift. It felt like a dare, a challenge thrown out into the crowd. Could she channel the spirit of transformation without discarding their past? Then Maria spoke, her tone calming the tension. "Sarah's right about honoring our history and adapting it. We've seen things evolve around us, but we don't have to lose what's precious to us." The voice of reason carried weight, and Sarah took that cue, embracing her friend's support. Maria's endorsement cast a wider net of acceptance, and Sarah seized the moment. What if we created a community project, an initiative where local stories are told through art, not just mine, but yours as well? We'll weave together our pasts into something new while keeping the garden alive, both as a serene tribute and a vibrant canvas for imagination. A ripple of response accompanied her words, murmurs drifting through the crowd like seeds in the wind. There was potential here. They were hungry for inclusion, for validation in their story. A young man, previously silent, stepped forward hesitantly. I've always thought murals could take away from the essence of a place. But if you're saying we can tell our stories through them, maybe, just maybe, that could change my mind. Encouragement flared within Sarah as she recognized his willingness to engage. Each moment of connection, each shared sentiment, added to her determination. But was she prepared to navigate the deeper challenges, especially those that lay within? Yet lurking behind the optimism was the familiar specter of self-doubt. What if she failed? What if her vision didn't resonate with anyone but herself? Could she bear the burden of dissatisfaction, both her own and that of others? The gathering was shifting. They were no longer simply observers, but potential collaborators in a vision she had only begun to define. The stakes were rising, and beneath the surface, Sarah sensed that the real test would soon begin, one that would test her ability to unite artistry with authenticity. With every ounce of her being, she could feel the impending confrontation of her convictions lurking just beyond the horizon. This was only the beginning. The real struggle, where her beliefs met the resistance woven into the fabric of their community, lay ahead. And yet, as the tension began to ease, her resolve solidified. She could be the change that honored her past while paving a new path. It was time to act, but how would she negotiate the complexities of art, history, and identity? All that was left was courage, the one commodity she needed to fuel her journey into the unknown. The air hummed with a newfound tension, the crowd's energy charging her resolve like a live wire. Sarah could feel the eyes of her community on her, a dual weight of expectation and skepticism knitting into a fabric worn too tight. Yet as she stood there, something shifted within. The rustle of doubt began to unravel, thread by tightening thread. She took a step back as Maria joined her side, the warmth of her presence a beacon amid doubt. The initial tumult of emotions shifted like the wind, dissipating the storm that had threatened to engulf her. But Sarah knew this wasn't merely a reprieve. It was the calm before a storm that would demand her fiercest self, one she had yet to fully discover. Let's break their ice with creativity. Maria leaned in, her eyes sparkling with thoughtful strategy. What about a showcase? A night where people share their stories and you can illustrate them with art? The idea lit a fire in Sarah's mind, illuminating the path ahead, but hesitation still weighed heavily within her. How could she ensure that the stories shared would feel authentic and resonate deeply? Was she capable of guiding these narratives into a visual space that felt both respectful and revolutionary? Your grandmother's legacy lives on through your voice, Maria continued, sensing Sarah's internal conflict. You've got the talent to bring their stories to life, but you need to let them speak for themselves too. Speak for themselves, Sarah echoed, turning the words over in her mind. What if this was the very key? To give them ownership over their narrative, and to trust that her art could become the vessel for their voices. Uneasy excitement bubbled beneath her skin, pumping through her veins as her vision sharpened. The task ahead was more intricate than she had imagined, a complex dance of collaboration and respect, requiring a balance between her artistic instincts and the voices clamoring to be heard. Sarah felt a flicker of confidence ignite. She had always considered herself a lone artist, but maybe this was the moment to harness the strength of others. As she began to sketch the outlines of her plan, how to facilitate story circles, how to encourage storytelling through art, Sarah took a deep breath, allowing the adrenaline of possibility to wash over her. Yet, the challenge remained. How would she navigate the individual narratives that might transcend her expectations? The crowd began to murmur again, their conversations intersecting, uncertain but hopeful. The young man who had supported her earlier approached, and in his eyes, Sarah saw a reflection of her own entangled emotions, tentative yet determined. I'd like to help. I think we can get more voices involved. I have some ideas. Would you like me to help you organize these story circles? Another joined in. With each new volunteer, a feeling of purpose filled the air, thickening with excitement. "Of course," Sarah stammered, barely containing the rush of gratitude and disbelief. Her heart slammed against her ribcage as she realized how easily doubt could devolve into support, how quickly rejection could morph into inclusion. But lurking beneath the buoyancy was an unsettling undercurrent. Could she manage a project that meant so much to many, especially when it was tethered to such a strong emotional history? Who would she be if the weight of someone else's past hinged upon her artistic choices? As she grappled with the profound implications of this partnership, her thoughts turned thinly veiled. What if their stories overwhelmed her? What if the burden of representation was too great? The warmth of the day dimmed, the sun hanging low as shadows lengthened, intensifying the moment. Silence washed over the crowd again as someone at the back shouted, "How do we know you can tell our stories? How do we trust you?" The question thudded like a raw nerve, and Sarah's pulse quickened in response. Engaging with the depths of their stories was one thing, conjuring the trust of a skeptical community was another beast entirely. This would not be an easy journey. In this moment, she had to confront a tempest within, a reflection of the uncertainty and the delicate duty that lay ahead. This was not just about art, it was about identity and legacy. As the murmurs grew into a ripple across the crowd, brutal honesty blazed like wildfire within her instincts. To build connection required vulnerability and courage, qualities she resolved to embody from this day forward. But the inner struggle continued. The man's question lingered, gnawing away at the edges of her resolve. Sarah realized she was not merely stitching together a mural of history. She was stepping into a role that demanded her to bare her soul. And as the crowd awaited her response, Sarah sensed that the real battle, the battle for her own voice amid the stories of others, was about to commence. Would she rise to the occasion, or would fear shackle her artistry yet again? As the tension thickened, Sarah opened her mouth to respond, her answer teetering on the brink of revelation. What lay ahead could forever change her, and the community she yearned to honor. The air pressed in on Sarah, a tangible force as she inhaled deeply, steadying herself at the crossroads of expectation and fear. What was it about that question that resonated so deeply? In that moment, she wasn't just an artist. She was the embodiment of every story she had ever sought to tell. "I understand your concerns," she began, her voice trembling slightly but resolute. "These stories are sacred. They belong to each of you. My role is to lend my hands to your voices, to create a space where your narratives can thrive without distortion." Something within her shifted at her own words, as if naming her aspirations aloud turned them solid, at least enough to stand on. Yet the crowd remained silent, a mixture of skepticism and uncertainty cloaking the atmosphere. She could feel the pulse of her heart racing. They were still waiting for proof, and she had not yet given them any. Staring into the sea of faces, Sarah remembered the stories her grandmother once shared, stories that reflected pain, joy, and everything in between. Those narratives had shaped her own identity. If she could stand in that truth, couldn't she also stand for others? She had never been one to shy away from vulnerability, and perhaps it was time she embraced it more fully. "I will be open to your feedback every step of the way," she promised, casting her eyes around the group. "This will be a collaborative process. I want to learn from each of you, to understand your experiences deeply so that I can bring your stories to life in a way that is authentic and powerful." The young man from moments before stepped forward, a spark igniting in his eyes. "I can help create the circles where we'll share these stories. We should make it easier for everyone to voice their ideas, especially those who are hesitant." His suggestion echoed the sentiment within her, and the swell of support around them began to rise. Sarah felt an unexpected warmth envelop her, a sensation that chased away the chill of uncertainty. She realized she wasn't alone anymore. The weight of their collective stories began to feel less like an anchor, and more like a current guiding her towards something greater than herself. They spent the next hours sketching out ideas, blending visions, colors, and voices into a mosaic of collaboration. Sarah's initial fears began to ebb as she took on the role of facilitator. Each suggestion became a building block, growing taller with each voice that joined in. She felt an unfamiliar strength surging within her. But beneath that burgeoning confidence simmered an undercurrent of true concern. By inviting these stories to the forefront, Would she be able to manage the emotional upheaval that often accompanying deeply personal narratives? Could she navigate the labyrinth of raw humanity without losing herself amid the chaos of feelings? As ideas flowed, she found herself mentally drafting boundaries, reminding herself not to adopt the weight of their histories as her own. Every story would be a gift she could help present, but only they could decide how it was told. Then the question returned uninvited, lancing through her resolve. What if she misrepresented someone? The thought felt like icy fingers creeping down her spine. The possibility of failure loomed larger now. With the trust of the community on the line, Sarah had never felt so exposed. As night enveloped them, she could sense the collective anticipation simmering, the atmosphere charged with potential. Reflections of the faces filled with hope, yet shadows of anxiety danced alongside them. It became clear that each member was weary from past disappointments, and the fragility of trust felt like a taut string, ready to snap. Suddenly, a voice rang out, sharp and cutting through. "You still haven't shown us you can do this, Sarah. What if you're no different? What if we lend you our stories and you twist them up?" This accusation steeled her spine. The truth of her task bore down on her, demanding a response. In this moment, she realized the pressure of expectation would not go away. She would have to confront it directly. But how? What tangible act could she offer as a bridge between fear and understanding? She was about to confront not only the doubts of the skeptics, but perhaps her own limitations. "I won't let you down," she finally declared, voice steady. But the uncertainty of whether she truly believed this washed over her like an ominous wave. As murmurs swelled in response, uncertainty crackled again in the air, filling the space with fraught tension. The real challenge would lie ahead. Would the community allow her to become a part of their story? Could she succeed where so many others had failed? And as the shadows deepened, Sarah knew that the very act of demonstrating her worth was about to begin, not just as an artist, but as an ally entrusted with the most sacred pieces of their lives. The moment for assertion had arrived, and with it, her pulse quickened at the enormity of what lay ahead. Would she embrace the looming challenge, or would doubt force her to retreat into safety? The urgency of the night bore down on Sarah like a storm cloud, muffling any remaining whispers of hesitation. Her heart thrummed loudly in her chest as she looked across the faces gathering around her, a mixture of skepticism, hope, and guarded vulnerability. Each pair of eyes seemed to hold their own story, a weight she was now responsible for, a burden that felt both overwhelming and exhilarating. "I want to start," she declared, each word a stepping stone into the unknown. "Let's not just talk about how we will share our stories. Let's do it." The proposal hung in the air, electric with possibility, but accompanied by apprehension. The same young man who had spoken before nodded, stepping up beside her. "Let's share a piece of our stories, something small, something that sparks our truth." His voice ignited a spark of direction, a way to dismantle the perceived barriers between them. Slowly, an older woman in the back of the crowd raised a trembling hand, her hair silver against the dim light. "I can start," she said, her voice thin but clear. "Years ago, I lost my sister to violence. For many years I felt invisible, as if her story was the only one worth telling. I want to reclaim that space." There was silence in her wake, a shared breath that acknowledged the palpable pain. When the woman finished, Sarah felt a shift within herself. This was it, the raw, unfiltered truth that had torn so many apart, yet could also illuminate the path ahead. "Thank you for sharing," Sarah said, her voice soft but steady. "Your sister and your story will not be forgotten." One by one, the stories began to tumble out, a mosaic of grief, strength, love, and disappointment layering upon each other. Each tale was an intricate thread weaving into Sarah's own narrative, and she felt more alive than ever. The initial tension began to ease, transforming into an unexpected camaraderie that stirred something deep within her. However, lurking beneath that camaraderie was still a shadow, an anxious whisper that questioned her capability to do justice to the stories being shared. In the moment of unveiling emotion, another voice cut sharply through the atmosphere. "You're just gathering our pain to amplify your own voice," a younger woman accused, her chin tilted defiantly, challenging Sarah's sincerity. The weight of her gaze felt like a stone dropped in the ocean of communal vulnerability. The accusation sparked something inside Sarah, igniting a flame of determination amidst the doubts. This was now a reckoning, a moment for self-reflection and identity affirmation. Rather than shying away, she embraced the discomfort. What I'm trying to create isn't about my voice being louder than yours. It's about elevating yours. But I need your trust. I need to know I can handle the intricacies of your stories. I'm here to listen and learn. But shadowy fears crept back, whispering counter-arguments. Was she capable of facilitating this emotional exchange? Would she crumble under the weight of their truths, or twist them into something unrecognizable? Amidst this turmoil, a glimmer of insight surged forward. What if we turned these stories into expressions, she suggested, inspired by their narratives? What if we used visual art, poetry, or recordings to capture the emotion we're feeling tonight? It was a bold proposal, inviting creativity into the room and shifting the focus from mere storytelling to actual artistic creation. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd, a collective sigh of breath that urged her forward. Sarah's heart raced with her newfound motivation. This could reshape their experiences into something tangible, a legacy not solely captured by her hands alone, but owned by each of them. Yet, amid that hopeful surge, the undercurrents of doubt and fear persisted. The fear of misrepresentation loomed larger than before. Who would speak out if she faltered? What if she had misread the nuances of a story? Or if, in her excitement, she missed the heart of it altogether? As she fostered new connections within the group, the whisper of doubt grew more insistent, echoing her fresh resolve. She knew she had to face this storm with courage. She would need to confront her own reluctance to fully trust in her abilities. Determined, she looked around the room and gathered the fortitude within her. Let's create together. Let's take those raw feelings and turn them into art. Who knows what magic we can make? Each nod of assent felt like an ember igniting into a flame. But then, the moment crystallized, a sharp reminder of the stakes involved. But if we fail, Sarah, the woman's voice from before returned, what if we end up with nothing? Perhaps the biggest revelation lay ahead of her. Would she stretch herself far enough to meet this challenge, or would she retreat once more into the realm of safety? The weight of expectations loomed. The moment of truth was dawning, and there was no retreat. With fresh resolve, she opened herself completely to the group, reaching for their stories, their truths. And while the specter of her insecurities lingered, she felt, deep down, that embracing this challenge might just reveal the artist she was destined to become. Could she meld the threads of their lives into a tapestry of understanding? The intersection of fear and creativity beckoned her forward, and with every heartbeat, she knew she was teetering on the precipice of transformation, standing at the edge of discovery that would reveal her true self. The atmosphere thickened with unspoken anticipation, the walls seemingly closing in around her as she prepared for the most significant leap yet. Would her decision to plunge into the deep end of emotion and expression lead to triumph or disaster? Only time would tell. The energy in the room shifted as anticipation clung to the air, heavy with the unspoken fears and hopes of everyone present. Sarah felt her pulse quickening, the weight of expectation pressing down like a ton of bricks. As she prepared to guide the group into this new territory of expression, she could almost visualize the looming shadow of doubt creeping back into her mind. Let's break into smaller groups, she suggested, her voice steadier than she felt. This way, we can really dive into what we want to express. The acknowledgement of collective storytelling seemed to spark something in the group. They engaged in quiet conversations, tentative yet animated. Feeling a surge of urgency, Sarah carved out a space for herself among the small clusters forming around the room. She quickly realized her role was not to dominate the conversations, but to facilitate their exploration. As they discussed various forms of artistic expression, the worry in her chest lightened. Perhaps leading this shared experience wasn't merely about her capability. It was about making space for them. Yet, with every fleeting moment of optimism, the younger woman's sarcastic comment echoed in her mind, reverberating deeper doubts. Was she more concerned about the spectacle of expression than their truths? Could she genuinely capture their sentiments without trivializing their pain? The stakes felt impossibly high, and her self-doubt began to weave its way back into her thoughts. As the groups dispersed, Sarah stayed close to one cluster, where the older woman who had shared first was discussing how poetry might articulate her experience of loss. Sarah took a breath, focusing intently. As she listened, she took notes, mindful of how each line and metaphor could embody the complexities of grief. What if we paired the poem with visuals, something to capture the emotion behind it, she ventured. The woman nodded slowly, her eyes glistening with contemplation. Perhaps images of the places we loved, or even the feelings that emerged during our toughest moments. Those could turn into a memory wall, a visual storytelling. The notion stirred something inside Sarah, igniting her resolve. This could be the intersection of pain and art she had been longing to explore. Meanwhile, she glanced toward another group, where they were deep into discussion about visual art. Fueled by burgeoning creativity, one young participant suggested using colors and shapes to convey their personal stories. This idea triggered a visceral reaction within Sarah. Could she dare to add her own vulnerability into this creative mix? Seizing the moment, she allowed her inner artist to surface. What if we all contributed to one piece, collectively transforming a canvas with our narratives, each brushstroke reflecting a story, a feeling, a moment we've endured? The room fell silent. "Why should we trust you?" The younger woman, who had doubted Sarah's intentions earlier, re-entered the fray. "What makes you worthy of telling our stories?" Their eyes were fixed on Sarah now, piercing through her like arrows. The room felt charged, the intensity palpable. They were all counting on her to be the bridge connecting their truths. Yet the arrogant refusal to retreat tugged at her. "Because I'm willing to stand in the discomfort alongside you," she declared, her voice quaking but resolute. "I realize that every story shared brings us closer to understanding. If I stumble, I'll take responsibility for it. But together, we can create something powerful enough to resonate far beyond our fears." A hush filled the space, each person absorbing her declaration. It was a risky assertion, both exposing and liberating. "Fine," the younger woman conceded, a challenge still simmering in her eyes. "But if this falls apart, it's on you, Sarah. Ready to take that risk?" Fueled by a blend of uncertainty and fierce determination, Sarah nodded. "Yes, I'll take that risk." As she resumed her role as a facilitator, a different kind of energy emerged. Each group stewed in their ideas. The collective creativity began to positive overflow. However, beneath that upbeat surface lay a current of tension. She sensed the expectations rising. What if her vision didn't align with theirs? What if she failed them? As she worked closely with the groups to refine their expressions, Sarah felt an unexpected wave of empowerment washing over her. This was a transformative moment. It wasn't merely about art. It was a chance for her to grow as a leader, to confront fears of inadequacy inside her. With every stroke of confidence, she contemplated the layers of shared vulnerability around her. Amidst it all, however, an unsettling thought surfaced. Would her ambition ultimately blur the authenticity of their experiences? The looming uncertainty returned, and she couldn't shake the feeling that a reckoning was on the horizon. This would not end without confrontation, and as the night unfolded, Sarah braced herself. What truths lay in the shadows waiting to emerge? The fragile promise of artistry hung in the air, but looming ahead was an impending storm. Each heartbeat seemed to whisper her hidden fears. Would this night illuminate their narratives, or would it be a mirror reflecting her own insecurities? The quiet buzz of creativity gradually diminished as each participant honed in on their craft. Sarah stood at the periphery of the room, observing the groups with a mixture of pride and trepidation. She felt like a conductor in front of an orchestra, where every musician was finding their rhythm, but not quite synchronized. The excitement in the air was palpable, threaded with the weight of the emotions they were about to unravel. Taking a deep breath, she approached the group dedicated to visual storytelling. They were discussing the palette for their collaborative piece, a palette that was to become both their refuge and battleground. Yet within the colorful dialogue, Sarah sensed a hesitance that mirrored her own. "What colors resonate with you? What stories do they tell?" she prompted, wanting to transmute their thoughts into tangible art. The youngest participant, a woman with bright blue hair that fell in waves over her shoulders, narrowed her eyes. "What if we choose colors that reflect sadness? Will it even resonate with anyone else?" Her skepticism hung thick in the air. Suddenly the room felt stifling, That challenge ignited something in Sarah, a flicker of frustration accompanied by clarity. Sadness is just as important as joy. It's a part of our narrative. Let's not shy away from it. It gives depth and meaning to our stories. A weighty silence followed her statement, and the younger woman seemed to soften, momentarily allowing her own vulnerability to seep through as she considered this. However, as Sarah moved to the next group, she was met with a different emotional texture, fervor mixed with urgency. They were discussing the poetry that would accompany their visual displays, the older woman passionately fighting against her insecurity. What if I can't express my truth fully? What if it sounds contrived? That's why this process matters, Sarah said, stepping closer. It's about digging deep to find what's authentic for you. Just as brushstrokes inform imagery, your words can layer your feelings on the page. Can we agree that vulnerability is courage? The room hummed with tentative agreement, but beneath the surface, complacency felt like a noose tightening around them. Doubt morphed into fear, and with that fear came the realization: failure wasn't just on Sarah, but on all of them too. There was an intensity in the older woman's gaze which made Sarah's heart race. We are all afraid. Let's channel that. I want you to think of the worst moment in your life and write about it without restriction. What did it teach you? The question resonated layers of complexity within the group. They leaned in, collective breath held as some wrote and others processed. The soft scratching of pens against paper felt like the beginning of healing. A raw alchemy of fear transformed into expression. But as the hours wore on, a shadow began to stretch across the room. The younger woman returned, her voice sharper than before. You claim to embody our fears, but aren't you still just a presenter, a bystander? What will your legacy even be in a room full of truth-tellers? Her challenge, tinged with accusation, struck like a blow. For a moment, Sarah felt the encroaching pressure of her own inadequacies. You're right, she admitted, steeling herself against the wave of panic turning her resolve to mist. I'm here to guide, to create space for your truths, but it's still my responsibility to be uncomfortable. My legacy is tied to what we craft together. That honesty caught the rest of the group off guard. Each member's attention swayed to Sarah, some contemplating their own hesitations. Then it's time we confront the past, the blue-haired participant blurted out, her intensity igniting the group. Our stories are alive. Sarah, help us set fire to them together. Let's create something that can't just fade away. That bold acceptance surged through Sarah. The moment hung in the air, electrifying yet daunting. Could they truly burn away their fears whilst shaping a legacy that embodied their pain? As the canvas was placed before them, a flicker of defiance shone in their eyes, mingling courage and trepidation still simmering beneath the surface. Each brush became a tool, not just for art, but for reclamation, a chance to form their truths anew. Yet, as the canvas stood blank and the tension escalated, Sarah felt the echo of her insecurities rise once more. How would she balance their voices with her own ambitions? What if she obscured their authentic rawness in pursuit of her vision? Every heartbeat thrust her deeper into conflicting currents. The fire to express was igniting, but would it burn too hot and too fast for them all? With the brush poised for the first stroke, Sarah realized the reckoning was not merely with the assembled group, but with herself. Could she be the artist and leader they needed? As the brush hovered above the canvas, she felt heavier burdens in the air. This was not merely an act of creation, it was a confrontation. The storm of their emotions awaited release, and the moment to execute her resolve was upon her. Would Sarah rise to the challenge, or succumb to the shadows lurking within her? The air crackled with unspoken anticipation as Sarah steadied her breath, each pulse resonating with the shared tension within the room. The canvas awaited her touch, an embodiment of both risk and possibility, a blank slate ready to house the emotions, memories, and untold stories of her community. The collective weight of their gaze rested on her, a mixture of skepticism and hope. This was her moment to embrace the role she had fought so hard to claim. She dipped the brush into the bright red paint, the color stark against the white canvas, representing the fierce love birthed from pain. With a bold stroke, she let the brush glimmer as it met the canvas, releasing the first wave of her vulnerability. Let's begin with our stories, Sarah proclaimed, her voice strong and unwavering. These brushstrokes don't just represent us, they capture everything we've endured. all the lessons learned and the legacies reclaimed? Her confidence began to ripple through the room, igniting a spark, one that cut through their hesitance and ignited a furious blaze of creativity. One by one, her peers picked up brushes, saturating the canvas with their emotions. Laughter and tears intermingled as colors blossomed, blue for sadness, yellow for hope, green for resilience. This canvas was no longer just hers, it was theirs, an intricate tapestry of collective experience. Yet, despite the burgeoning excitement, Sarah felt a residual weight of doubt lurking in the corners of her mind. What if the end result didn't honor the essence of their stories? How could she ensure their truths radiated through her artistic lens? But she understood now that authenticity couldn't be boxed. It emerged when voices collaborated, creating connections that transcended individual pain. As she watched the eclectic blend of emotions spill onto the canvas, she felt a shift inside herself. Each brushstroke reflected their narrative, the losses endured, the triumphs celebrated, the love shared. The familiar pulse of inadequacy was slowly replaced by growing assurance. Where before she saw potential failure, she now glimpsed the power of transformation wrought from unity. Each stroke here represents a heartbeat, she reminded them, her eyes sweeping across the room. Let's turn our vulnerabilities into strength. We are not just sharing sorrow, we are cultivating rebirth. Murmurs of agreement surged. The younger woman from before hesitated, glancing at the emerging artwork. No longer was Sarah just the self-centered artist she once feared to be. She was now intertwined with each participant's history, courageously standing to illuminate the rich stories they dared to share. Hours slipped by, and the canvas evolved into a vibrant montage. The riot of colors danced together, telling tales of heartache softened by resilience. The air grew thick with creativity. Shadows of uncertainty faded into vibrant expressions of brave authenticity. The act of creation simultaneously unveiled their strength and revealed their shared humanity. When the final strokes settled and they stepped back to examine their communal masterpiece, astonishment washed over her. This was more than art. It was a testament to their intertwining legacies, a poignant reminder that their past shaped their present and propelled them into the future. In those moments, Sarah felt the remnants of self-doubt fading. She had stepped into her power as an artist, not just by her brushwork, but in how she had guided a community through their shared metamorphosis. The weight of her fears dissolved into a rich tapestry of achievement, the realization that she was not just an architect of art. She was also a curator of voices, a steward of stories. The room erupted in applause, each sound a wave of affirmation. "We did this together," someone called out, voices lifting Sarah higher. A rush of emotion surged through her. She felt herself swell with pride, not just for the artwork but for the connections forged. The bonds of hardship transformed into a beautiful legacy. In that moment, a profound truth crystallized within her. Growth often sprouts from the rich soil of vulnerability. She could conquer doubt through collaboration, draw strength from storytelling, and embrace her identity as an artist boldly reflecting her community's diverse tapestry. As they projected their art onto future engagements and possibilities, she knew she had truly arrived, solidified as both an artist and a community member, proudly rooted in the legacies they had preserved and the stories forged anew. Standing amidst the vibrant canvas, Sarah smiled, a sense of solid confidence enveloping her. The legacy she feared would burn had, instead, through her own growth and reconciliation, blossomed into something flourishing and eternal. She had achieved her goal not only as an artist, but as a voice of transformation, embodying both her grandmother's legacy and her own aspirations. Through creative courage, she received recognition, not just personally and professionally, but as a valued member of her community, a triumphant embodiment of individual achievement. Now she stitched a new narrative together, one that would resonate through generations. Each brushstroke was a reminder of a past lovingly integrated into a future they all could create together. Join this transformative journey. Your own legacy awaits you. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will inspire your own individual journey. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support is crucial in sharing these narratives. Comment below with your reactions and theories about this conclusion. You need to be part of this conversation. And don't wait another second. Share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories know the profound impact of supporting this channel through these actions.